Sarah is a 42-year-old public school teacher who works 50 hours a week, pays her taxes, hasn't made any catastrophic life mistakes, and battles no addictions. Yet every night at 9 p.m. she grades math tests by dashboard light in her 2014 Honda Civic in a 24-hour gym parking lot before putting up a sunshade to sleep. She is entirely homeless, and right now, hundreds of thousands of middle-class Americans are doing the exact same thing. When we conceptualize the housing crisis, the imagery that usually comes to mind consists of encampments beneath highway overpasses or sleeping bags lining the sidewalks of major metropolitan centers. However, there is a second, entirely invisible city quietly sprawling across the nation, hiding in plain sight. We are talking about vast, stealth neighborhoods composed of minivans, SUVs, and RVs systematically parked in Walmart lots, 24-hour fitness centers, and desolate industrial parks. This shadow network of vehicular living is expanding at a terrifying velocity. By the year 2024, the total homeless population in the United States hit an unprecedented spike, reaching a record high of over 1 million individuals. This represented a staggering 18% increase from the previous year. But the most shocking revelation lies hidden within the unsheltered statistics. In major urban centers like Los Angeles, official counts now indicate that an astonishing 50% of the entire unsheltered population lives inside their vehicles. For a massive and growing demographic, the automobile has permanently replaced the apartment building. For decades, public perception has comfortably categorized homelessness as a crisis born strictly out of severe mental health struggles or crippling substance addiction. This assumption allowed society to view the unhoused as a tragic exception rather than a systemic rule. But a demographic dependency comparison reveals a terrifying inversion taking place across the country. The new face of the vehicular homeless population is not the chronically unemployed. They are fully employed, working-age adults who commute to steady jobs. These are individuals who generate enough income to afford a monthly car payment and comprehensive auto insurance, but who fundamentally cannot secure a residential lease. We are witnessing the rapid expansion of the working homeless. The most recent demographic data shatters any comforting illusions we might hold, highlighting a devastating 39% increase in family homelessness. These are parents holding down full-time jobs, children doing homework in the back seats of sedans, and senior citizens on fixed retirement incomes who have been entirely priced out of the traditional housing market despite doing everything right. To understand exactly how the American middle class was forcibly pushed into the driver's seat, one must look at the brutal, unrelenting mathematics of the past 2 decades. The crisis we are witnessing is not a sudden accident. It is the mathematical guarantee of a system completely detached from the reality of working-class wages. Between the years 2001 and 2023, a contextual comparison of economic data reveals a catastrophic divergence. Across the United States, median rents skyrocketed by an astronomical 23%. In that exact same 22-year window, the median income for renters grew by a microscopic 5%. That devastating 23-to-5 ratio is the precise mathematical gap where the American dream went to die. When the foundational cost of basic shelter multiplies at nearly 5 times the rate of human earning power, mass displacement becomes a structural inevitability. The gap between what it costs to exist and what corporations are willing to pay for labor has grown so wide that millions of full-time workers have fallen directly into their cars. The modern American paycheck is terrifyingly fragile, teetering on a razor-thin margin that leaves virtually no room for error. According to deeply alarming data compiled by the United States Government Accountability Office, for every $100 increase in median rent, there is an automatic and measurable 9% rise in the homelessness rate. Just $100. That is the exact threshold separating a family from a warm living room and the cold interior of a parked car. With market-rate apartments now requiring an income more than twice the minimum wage in a vast majority of jurisdictions, the margin of safety for the working class has been entirely erased. In this hyperinflated economic environment, it no longer takes a catastrophic life event to induce homelessness. One minor, routine emergency is completely lethal. A single unexpected medical bill or a broken vehicle alternator is all it takes to trigger an eviction notice. A single week of unpaid sick leave becomes the financial catalyst that pushes a family out of their home and permanently into their sedan. When you contrast our current socio-economic reality with the policy structures of past decades, the deliberate dismantling of the American safety net becomes glaringly obvious. In the post-war era, federal and state governments recognized that a stable middle class required protective buffers against extreme poverty. Today, that net has been systematically shredded. The crisis escalated exponentially with the expiration of pandemic-era protections. Policies like federal eviction moratoria, expanded child tax credits that briefly lifted millions out of poverty, and emergency relief funds proved that homelessness could be mitigated through direct government intervention. But when those final layers of artificial life support were abruptly ripped away, the working class was left to absorb the brutal shockwaves of historic inflation entirely on their own. We have fundamentally transitioned from a society that subsidized housing development and protected its vulnerable citizens to a hyper-commodified system that leaves renters entirely at the mercy of unchecked market forces, forcing them onto the concrete lots of big-box retailers. Faced with the terrifying prospect of sleeping on the street, one might ask why these displaced workers choose their vehicles over traditional emergency shelters. The answer reveals the financial paradox of the vehicle haven. For a family suddenly forced out of an apartment, a car provides a crucial modicum of physical security, locked doors, climate control, and a barrier against the unpredictable, often dangerous realities of congregate shelters. More importantly, it provides the mobility necessary to maintain their employment. But this perceived sanctuary is ultimately a devastating financial trap. Once an individual moves into their car, gasoline, auto insurance, and vehicle maintenance instantly become their new rent. They are forced to heavily invest their limited resources into a rapidly depreciating asset simply to survive. When the engine dies or the transmission fails, the nightmare deepens exponentially. They do not just lose their reliable transportation to work, they lose their entire home in one fell swoop, stranding them permanently on the pavement. It is highly comforting for many Americans to dismiss this epidemic as a highly localized problem, a direct consequence of California's progressive policies or the notoriously inflated real estate market of New York City. But the data paints a much darker, far-reaching picture. This is a national bleed. While coastal metropolitan areas certainly report the highest raw numbers of unsheltered individuals, the explosive growth rate of vehicular homelessness is sweeping across the entire country. Current statistics reveal that 43 different states are seeing massive percentage increases in vehicular homelessness. This includes states traditionally viewed as affordable, with staggering spikes documented in places like Illinois, Massachusetts, and Hawaii. The housing crisis has fully metastasized into the American heartland. It is proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that no zip code, no matter how rural or suburban, is immune to the widening chasm between stagnant income and the astronomical cost of living. If we want to understand why this displacement is happening on such a massive scale, we must examine the structural failure occurring at the very top of the economic food chain. Housing in the United States is no longer treated as fundamental shelter. Over the last decade, global capital flows and massive institutional investors have systematically targeted residential real estate, treating homes not as places for human beings to live, but as high-yield, safe deposit boxes for parked wealth. By purchasing single-family homes in bulk and prioritizing the construction of ultra-luxury developments over the deeply affordable units actually required by the working class, these financial entities are deliberately engineering artificial scarcity. They are restricting the supply of available housing to continuously drive up rental prices and maximize their quarterly returns. The very earth beneath our feet is being hoarded by corporate conglomerates, effectively pricing the American middle class completely off the map. When shelter is fully financialized, the inevitable byproduct is displacement. Instead of addressing this massive deficit in affordable housing, our legal and municipal systems have chosen a much darker path, punishing the displaced. Across the country, city councils and local governments are granting themselves incredibly broad powers to criminalize the simple act of survival. Ordinances banning overnight parking, cracking down on vehicle habitation, and outlawing sleeping in public spaces are being fiercely enforced against people who literally have nowhere else to go. When a municipality impounds a family's car for illegal overnight parking, they are not just issuing a traffic ticket, they are legally confiscating a family's only shelter. To retrieve that vehicle, the unhoused family must pay exorbitant towing fees, daily storage rates, and municipal fines, trapping them in an inescapable cycle of debt. If the fees cannot be paid within a strict legal window, the city auctions off their home. This punitive system effectively institutionalizes poverty, violently pushing the working homeless out of the relative safety of their vehicles and directly onto the unforgiving concrete of the streets. When we apply predictive analysis to these current data sets and project these mathematical trajectories into the future, the outlook is deeply, profoundly alarming. If the current trends of institutional land grabs remain unchecked, and if the catastrophic 23-to-5 ratio between inflation and wage stagnation continues to widen, the vehicular homeless population will not simply grow, it will fundamentally normalize. Within the next decade, living in a vehicle will transition from being an emergency shelter of last resort into a permanent, standard tier of the American class system. We are hurtling toward a dystopian reality where a massive, fully mobile underclass is permanently established. This is a population that will be relied upon to service the economy by day, only to quietly disappear into the shadows of industrial parking lots by night. The middle class isn't vanishing, it is actively being displaced. They are moving into the driver's seat, turning the key and staring out the windshield with the realization that they have nowhere left to go.